All right, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are on the planet. My name is Min Grinvald. I'm Kintone's technical evangelist, and it's a pleasure to have you with me here today for our React search bar workshop. 3 to-dos. First is to git clone the GitHub repository. There's a link right on the slide if you've downloaded that already. If you haven't, should be in the chat. In addition to that, go ahead and sign up for a Kintone developer account. That's going to help us. It's going to be instrumental for us later because it's a necessary step for us to spin up a Kintone developer environment. The second part being creating a Kintone subdomain. So you click on that link, and I'll walk through the steps and just very shortly to make sure everyone's following along. And then, of course, you can post questions in the chat at any time. My colleagues, Will, Genji, and Sean, will be here to make sure you get everything that you need. If you are running into any errors, any unexpected errors, make sure that in your messages to any of them that you include your code snippet that's relevant, as well as the specific error message that you've got. That'll help us troubleshoot more effectively. And for those of you who are going to stay until the end, we've got a raffle for you for a $25 gift card. So that's good news. And then a bonus for those of you who are joining us from the United States, we will also be giving out swag. If you are in the GitHub repository, this is going to walk you through some steps for how to install the repository in your repository on your machine. And then the details are listed in the getting started over here. So you'll run these commands from your terminal, and we're going to use the repository as a starting point. It'll be the workshop branch, which is what you see over here. It says clone-v workshop. We're going to be our Git head is going to be on the workshop. All right, and to sign up for a developer account, you'll follow this link. Make sure you do not use Safari, Chrome, or Firefox, both will work. And then make sure that you also set up your machine to accept cookies from that site. And then when you create a Kintone subdomain, which you'll do at this link, you'll need to fill out your first name, last name, email address, company name, and then your Kintone developer license subdomain. It's only alphanumeric characters and a dash that's accepted, also known as a hyphen. So lowercase, actually, no, sorry, it's not alphanumeric, it's just lowercase and numbers and hyphens. Sorry about that. And finally, to kick off, right? Finally, to begin, I want to introduce my colleagues who are joining me here today from all around the world. Will, Genji, and Sean. All of whom who are joining us from Japan. All right, folks, let's build the research bar with React. Here's what we're going to do today. This is inside of our Kintone environment. We'll have a database, a list of different records, in this case manga, and what we'll be doing is we will be typing into a search bar and narrowing down, filtering our results to just the ones that match the text that we've entered into the search bar. This workshop is going to have a few pieces to it, a few parts to it. First is the project setup. We're going to install the dependencies. Oops, looks like we've got a typo over here. No big deal. We'll set up we'll configure the settings and the variables, and then we'll talk about the run scripts. And then we'll move from the code back into Kintone. Well, actually, we'll move away from the code and into Kintone for the first time. We'll talk about what it is. We'll talk about how we'll be using it today. And then from there, we'll go back into the code and we'll look at the React components and how they engage, how they work together to render results that are pulled from the Kintone API headers. Again, if you haven't done this already, please make sure that you've downloaded the repository. And once you've done that, you can follow these steps. Make sure that we've got node modules that are running active, and we can take it from there. So one thing that you can do, you can make sure that your node version and the npm version are fully updated. And what that's going to do is it's going to make sure you're not getting like weird errors that are flowing. Okay, so I just realized that since I refreshed the workshop, I didn't do some of this. So give me 1 second, and I'm going to npm install this bad boy. I'm going to npm install this bad boy. Let's keep going. The repository, when you open it up, is going to have this directory structure to it. In the Kintone React search bar folder, you'll see we've got a folder for the source code. We've got a Webpack configuration file, npm start script, the package.json. These are all fairly standard for npm for npm. And then we've got this documentation that's right inside of the repository, a dist folder where we will be outputting our quote unquote compiled code. Well, yeah, it's compiled code. And then a customized dash manifest file. This is for a npm package called Kintone Customized Uploader that we will be using to automatically push our compiled code into Kintone. The repository in VS Code will look like it does on the right-hand side. There'll be more colorful icons, and it'll help us to distinguish the different files from each one. Another way to think about this directory structure is the following way. So the source folder over here is going to hold 2 other subfolders, one where we handle all of our API requests, and another where we've got a components folder that stores or that's holding different React components. The result list React component, the search bar React component, and then also there's the index React component, because React essentially it's a component that holds all of its other component in itself. And then this get records.js file, this is what's going to handle our API calls to Kintone. And then any kind of environmental variables, any credentials that's going to happen if it needs to rhombuses, diamonds. The files that we're going to be touching today are the files that are started. So all of our React components, as well as our environmental variables. You'll notice that our API call is not touched today. If you'd like to mess around with that API request, please feel free to do so either after completing this workshop with us, on your own time, whatever works for you. And you can see in more detail how it'll work as you break it and fix it, as we are wont to do when we're playing around with these things. And we will move on to talking about Kintone. The reason why we're going to talk about Kintone first is because this is it's a tool that we're going to be using in this build that you are likely the least familiar with. And we want to talk also about why we're using it. So we'll begin by talking about what Kintone is first. It's a platform for collaboration. It's a no-code, low-code platform. So teams with varying with people with varying levels of technological savvy can collaborate on their data efficiently and build it the way they want to hold their data and its relationships in the way that best serves their needs. The reason why Kintone is special, and not just any database or any online database or any no code solution or low code solution, is that in Kintone, the focus is on teamwork and collaboration. And so as a result, the platform has been built with collaboration in mind. And for that reason, the data and the conversations about that all in one place. that sounds strange when you think about it, like why is that a big deal? But actually look at how people typically use their tool, their computer tooling, right? We've got data that's living in multiple places. So you've got files in PowerPoint or Word or Dropbox, or maybe they're in your email, or maybe they're on OneDrive. You can be in many different places. Then you've got communication about those files that's in completely other places. Could be Slack, could be in meetings, and then the minutes are in a different place also. And so there's this diffusion of like a fragmentation of data that creates friction in the experience of working. The data, the conversations about the data, typically all over the place. And so what is missing is unified communication. And what's possible inside a platform, inside the Kintone platform, is to remove that friction and keep the conversation actually right there where the data lives. And so when you can talk about the data right there where the data is, suddenly things get done a lot faster and easier. There's more transparency, and it's easier to have work happen well. So there are some other features of Kintone that are important to note. There's the ability to create workflows, what we call process management, which passes along a record so that the right people are seeing it, the right information at the right time. So you can imagine expense reporting, hiring processes, or legal document reviews, where there's some item that moves from person to person as it goes through a series of approvals or revisions or cancellations until it reaches some final step. So for example, in expense reports, like a user would submit them, the manager might approve them, and then they would get sent along for the accounting department for processing. And so Kintone has a workflow feature that will allow you to do that. Now, the main building block in Kintone is something we call an app. And you can imagine an app as a table in a database or a spreadsheet in a workbook, only with a lot more power and benefits wrapped around. What's nice about apps are that they're very easy to build. And you do them by basically dragging and dropping form fields from a palette onto a canvas. So what you're seeing over here is a specific field, the settings of which have been opened up, and we're adding, actually it's a drop-down field, and we're adding drop-down options through a drag and drop, point and click interface. Now, what's neat about that is that if you are allergic to technology, which I don't think anybody on this call is allergic to technology, you probably wouldn't be in this workshop if you were, but imagine someone you know who's allergic to technology, or somebody who just doesn't like it, or isn't good at it, or isn't as good as they think they are. They've got a lot of fears, anxieties, or concerns about their use of technology. This interface democratizes access to them being able to create what they need. So over here, they get to do something that just wasn't possible for them before, because they were freaking out about how hard it is. And actually, building apps on Kintone is quite easy. So that's for the folks on the spectrum who are tech averse. But what about people like you? Well, folks like you are, frankly, you have harder problems to deal with, or you should be having harder problems to deal with them. How do you put together a database to meet, your customers' needs? And so Kintone allows you to use this drag and drop interface so that you can build what you want very, very quickly, and then spend your resources doing more important things. The nice thing about apps is that they're also extensively customizable with client-side JavaScript. So another piece of the puzzle is that, and this is for you folks who are tech inclined, not the ones who are allergic to technology, but you can create JavaScript files like what we're going to do today, and upload them into the cloud, onto your subdomain, onto your Kintone environment, and have those JavaScript files change the way Kintone behaves for your users. So that gives you like a super ability to have like lots and lots of flexibility in the use of this platform that goes beyond what a typical user might. So ultimately what you see is the opportunity for everyone to contribute. So if you don't know how to code, you can self-serve and build the stuff that you want without needing to bother the people who are great at coding and who have better things to do. And if you do know how to code and you need to upgrade your Kintone environment or modify it in some way that's be outside of the native functionality, that you have the ability to do that. Ultimately, this approach is designed to fulfill what we call the promise of groupware. What do we mean when I say groupware? What I mean by groupware is collaborative software that helps teams work together better wherever they are. And so the promise of groupware is to share meaningful insights about data and have those insights become operationalized quickly. Ultimately, that's like a key reason why we build software, right? We want to make things go faster. We want to have better insight about the data that we have, and we want to be able to hold that data well. And so groupware ties all of that together, and if we can do it well, then what we've done is we've helped move along the decision-making process so that the teams that we care about can make better decisions faster. Where does this leave you as a developer? Well, developers can contribute in a whole bunch of really important ways. And one of them is by the ability to create something we call a command center. So you can imagine, like, remember, if you can upload lots of client-side JavaScript or CSS to this environment, then you can have a lot of power over how this thing looks and feels, as well as how it integrates with other third-party web applications to exchange data and ultimately become like a collaboration layer that sits on top of your presentation layer, that sits on top of your data layer. Another thing that you can do that I've mentioned a few times already is developing these JavaScript customizations or even packaging them into zip files, which we call plugins, which then users who are less tech savvy can simply upload to their environment and then use without needing to be touching JavaScript. Inside of Kintone, you have many tools to help you do this. We've got a JavaScript API, which you can hook which your client side code can take advantage of. And we've got REST APIs that you can access from other web applications as well, or other scripting that you've got on some other servers. API tokens, webhooks, plugins, JavaScript customizations, CSS and HTML customizations, and precise permission controls. But ultimately, we want to be putting a lot of power in your hands so that you can do the most with what you've got. So I mentioned custom look and feel, and I'm pretty serious about it. When we say custom look and feel, what I mean is it can look any way you want. So on the left hand, we've got this way of graphing some of our data by magnitude with something called bubble cloud, where the larger bubbles represent larger magnitudes of whatever it is that's being measured. And on the right hand side, this is a classic that Will did a long time ago, where we just set up like what's called a custom view, where you can play space invaders. You can imagine a custom view as like a block for HTML. You can put whatever, not whatever you want, but many things. So if you're looking to Kintone as an opportunity for self-improvement and learning, then we've got a few recommendations for you. You can use it to keep learning new JavaScript tricks. You can publicize what you've learned on tech blogs, and you can also share your project with the community. If you're coming to Kintone with more of a business mentality, and you're like, hey, I know how to code, but I want to make some money. What do I do? Well, here's 3 possibilities for you. And so one is to create and sell Kintone extensions. And these, as I mentioned before, are the packaged plugins. So you create some customizations and wrap them in a zip file that anybody can upload and use. You can consult with firms on achieving business goals. So this could be like a standard business consultant plus role, the plus being you've got coding skill. You can do more and you can make a bigger difference for those customers. And then you can also develop Kintone customizations for customers as well. So the difference between these two being, more or less coding, but ultimately still driving results for your customers. So that's why we're talking about Kintone to you. because if you've got any interest in coding, you may also, you may have an interest in increasing your abilities to code. You may have an interest in making some money. Whatever it is, wherever you land, these are some of the opportunities that you've got available on our platform. And so from here, let's go ahead and create a Kintone database app. We're going to go through this step by step. And it's going to start first by checking your email. At this point in time, you should have already, if you have not already logged into your subdomain, but you've already created your subdomain, and what there is to do is go into your email and look for an email that says, welcome to Kintone, one more step to developer license. You'll click on these buttons, you'll set an initial password, and the first screen that you'll come to will be this one. This is the screen that you'll see when you just straight log into Kintone. It's got an option for administration or to log into the platform. You'll of course click on Kintone button that's surrounded in that red outline, making it a dead giveaway that that's where we're going next. And here we're going to land on our portal. So this portal screen is where all the action starts. And what we're going to do, just to acquaint you with what's going on over here. This is the place where you'll see all of the stuff that's most important to you, which is what you'd expect to see the first thing that you log on, the first place that you log on. So you can imagine this is a dashboard. And when it's fully fleshed out, it'll have things like important links to take you to exactly where you need to go, or the most important data that requires your immediate attention or has urgency to it, or the stuff that is typically requiring your attention over and over again, even though it might not be urgent or important. Right now, this portal is empty, as it should be, because we just created one from scratch. And in this Scratch portal, we're going to create our first app, which you'll do by clicking on the plus sign in the right-hand side over here. You'll be taken to something that's called the Kintone Marketplace, although it's better that you think about it as a library, because there's nothing that you pay for over here. But there are different kinds of things you can take off the shelves. So there are lots of different ways to create apps. We're going to create ours from scratch, and we'll do that by clicking Create App from Scratch inside of this button, inside of this red outline right over here. And when we do that, now we are in the new app interface. This is where the canvas is. You'll see there are 4 tabs: Form, Views, Graphs, and App Settings. We should automatically land on Form, and we'll see a blank canvas and a palette of fields that we'll be able to drag from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. I'm going a little bit ahead of myself because actually the first thing we're going to do is change the name of our app. It'll always start by saying New App. We want to input manga database. This is going to be our list of manga comics. Do we call them manga comics, or they're just manga?
Manga. Yeah.
All right. Well, from there, we'll start dragging and dropping fields from the left-hand side of the page to the right-hand side. And what we're going to do is we'll first drop in 2 text fields. Drag and drop, 2 text fields. The text field is at the top right-hand corner of that palette. All right. We're beginning to get in business, and hopefully you're beginning to see how easy it is to build databases, to build forms, really. From here, we're going to modify the settings for both of these text fields. And so you'll do that by hovering over a field, and then at the top right corner of the field, you'll see this little gray gear wheel. Hover over that gear wheel, you'll see a drop-down context menu come up, and you'll select Settings. What we're going to do is edit the name and the field code. And so once you've clicked on Settings, you'll see that there are these text settings, right? Each field has its own way to be modified graphically. And so we'll change the name from text to title. And then at the very bottom, there's something called a field code. And this is how our code will reference this field, right? We might have fields that to a user may have identical names, but of course the field has to have some kind of unique nomenclature on the back end for the code to be able to differentiate one from another. And so that field code is the unique identifier from the coding perspective. We want to change to title with a lowercase t. And let's keep it exactly the way that we say it over here, because later on, this will be important. And if we mess this up, it'll throw some errors, and then you might get thrown by that. And it's just not a useful place for learning to happen, to be like, oh, the field code needs to be changed. I mean, like, if it is, it's fine. But ideally, we want to mess up in other areas for better learning instead. So we'll change the title with a capital T in the name. So from text to title, we'll do the same thing to title with a lowercase. And Sean's dropping in the chat that field codes are case sensitive. Thanks for that reminder, Sean. They very much are case sensitive. That's title with a lowercase t. And then we do that for the next text field as well. For the author with a capital A and the name, and then the field code will be author with a lowercase a in the field code. Once you've done one of them, you'll save, and then you'll move to the other one. You'll make these changes, and then you'll hit that blue save button again. And at that point, you should see you've got two fields in your canvas. One of them says title with a capital T. One of them says author with a capital A. And from here, we can move to the next tab. This is the Views tab. In this Views tab, what we're going to do is we're going to add a custom view. This is the view that we're going to be building our search bar in. And so you'll click on that Views tab, and you'll click on the plus sign that comes after it to add a view. Before I continue, I want to make sure that you're all tracking with me, or you're mostly tracking with me at this point. So please go ahead and raise your electronic hand if you are like either past where I've gone or you're up to speed with me. Okay, great. Narayana, Christopher, okay, Jean-Noel, Russ, okay, Robert. Okay, good. I'm going to keep on going at this pace. And then if I'm going too fast, please, you can go ahead and drop in the chat. Be like, what was that again? Or please explain this to me differently, or go slower. But in any case, we're going to click on add a view. And now in that view screen, we're going to set up a custom view. You'll see there are 3 radio buttons: list view, calendar view, and custom view. Click on custom view and you'll see the setup change. Okay. We're going to do 2 things. First, you see there's this view ID over here. Copy and paste it somewhere important. Yeah, make sure you've pasted it in case you're going to overwrite the copy, because you need this number. I'm going to say to you, hey, the custom view ID that we copied long ago, we need that right now, so get it. And that'll happen in a little while, not at the moment, but when I talk about that custom view ID, that thing that we got back then, this is what I'm talking about, that number. Over here you see it's 5524234. Yours will be whatever numbers it'll be. And then there's one more thing to do on this page, which is to add this HTML code in. A custom view is basically a container to hold HTML, but not JavaScript. It's HTML only. The JavaScript gets hooked in elsewhere when we upload our JavaScript customization. So what we need is to be able to reference the HTML that we are dropping in, and we do that by adding in an ID attribute with a value of root. All of our React behavior is going to hang off of this div and in this div. And so the purpose of this HTML code over here is simply to create a place where all of our scripting behavior will like lock on. That's what that's for. And then once you've done that, at the top left part of the page, there's a blue save button. Please click that. Okay. If you've done those 2 steps, if you've created a custom view, copied the view ID, and added that div with an HTML with an ID of root, and you've saved that, and you've created 2 text fields, name and author, with field codes of title and author with field codes of title and author both lowercase, you're in great shape. And what you'll see once you come back to this screen is there's you'll see this blue activate app button on the top left-hand side. Please click that. What that's going to do is basically move your app from development into production. Let me go ahead and get a quick hand raise at this point in time, and let me know that you're tracking with me. All right, Sean, terrific. Robert, Mariana, Christopher, and Noel. Excellent, everyone. Good work so far. We'll create our first record at this point. See, after we've spun up our app, there's we'll be now in the app and it will be empty. Remember I said an app is like a spreadsheet in a workbook or a table in a database, only with more benefits and more power. Well, if we just created a brand new worksheet or a brand new database table, we have no data. It's empty. So this is exactly what we would expect to see: a table with empty values, or what we call a list view. And so we'll click on this plus sign right over here. And you'll see we'll go into a new record. And at this point, we can add a title and an author. Genji's seeded our first value with Attack on Titan by Hajime Isayama. And you can add whatever title and author you want. It's not going to matter. But in any case, the important thing is to add and then click save. And then to do this, another let's see, another at least 2 more times, 2 or 3 more times. What you'll do is, now that you've created the record, and you'll land on the page where the record is, but we actually want to go back to the list view. So you'll click on that MongoDB breadcrumb, and it will take you back to this list view page. You'll see we got that first record in, the one that had whatever values you put in. Go ahead and create 2 more, 3 more records. And then when you're done, please raise your electronic. Folks, if you've created a few records, terrific. What we're going to do at this point is check out that custom view. And so what you're going to do is go click on that blue rectangle, and there's a drop-down menu over there with views. And so you'll see we're currently in the all records view, but there's another view called view 1, which is actually your custom view. Click on it, and you'll see that there's nothing here, which is exactly what we're expecting because we haven't done anything other than add an empty div. If you spun up your console and inspected the various HTML tags, you would find that div in there and it would be empty, and we would have nothing to show for ourselves, which is perfect, actually. It's exactly where we should be. Okay, so we're complete with our Kintone setup at this point in time. We have the database, a simple database. It's a table with MongoDB information in it. It's got a few records. We've got a custom view with a div that's just waiting to have behavior injected into it. And so that's where we are going to kick off our time with the code, is injecting behavior into empty divs. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because actually that's not the first thing that we do. The first thing that we do is we start to make our code workable. So at this point in time, I'm going to take a lovely seat using my standing desk. And now that we're coding, it's sitting time. We've built this nice Kintone subdomain, and we want to be able to connect it to the code that we have. So let's do that first. And so here I've got the file directory for our project in VS Code, and it's open and it's nice, lovely. The first thing that I'm going to do to set up my connection to Kintone is look at a file I call .n. We want to be able to programmatically log And so what we want to do in this, but our login information is sensitive, is sensitive, right? We don't want to just put this information into GitHub and have anybody be able to log in. And the problem is once it's on GitHub, it's forever on GitHub, because even if you delete it, people can still go back into your GitHub history and look for things that you've deleted and see what's changed. So the point is never get that sensitive information on GitHub for any reason ever. And so this .env.example file is a way of handling that sensitive information. What we've done is we've taken the sensitive information and anything that will land into a key value pair, and we've identified what the keys are, and we've left the values blank. What we're going to do is we're going to create a separate file called .env. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to there we go. And what I've done is I've duplicated this .env.example, and I'm duplicating it and changing the name of this file to .env. Now, there's a reason why we've got two files, and it has to do with the kind of npm package that we've selected to handle the environmental variables. What we can do is upload to GitHub a blank or an example environmental variables file, which will show to whoever is accessing a repository what are the environmental variables that need, what are the keys that need values. The actual values we're going to keep on our machine, and we'll put over here inside this .env file, which is get ignored. So it will never be added unless you subvert that somehow, but the point is it'll never be added automatically. And so we can sleep safe and sound knowing that we don't have to worry about our environmental variables going up to the cloud. I'm going to put in my environmental variables over here. You put in yours, and mine is going to be different. So for example, my base URL is going to be dev events. What does that mean? So remember when you created a Kintone subdomain and yours was like blah blah blah.kintone.com, like weekend-hacker.kintone.com. Well, the one I'm using is dev events.kintone.com, and the username I'm using is developer, and the password is whatever the password is. And then there's this thing called view ID. Hey, folks, do you remember that custom view ID that I said, hey, copy this because you're going to want it later? Well, this is exactly what you're going to put it. And so you can go ahead and do that right now. Quotes are optional. Oh, my mistake. Genji, the base URL actually is not just that that subdomain portion. The base URL will actually be something like http:// then your subdomain.kintone.com. So folks, my apologies. Your base URL is this whole thing, not just your subdomain. Okay, folks, so here's how you can get your Kintone base ID, base URL, and username. So once you log into Kintone, your URL will look something like this. The main difference being that whatever this prefix is, that we call a subdomain, whatever your environment is, it will be a different string. That is your Kintone base URL. This is you're looking to pull that string out and put it into your .env file. Your username is going to be the name that you signed up with. Ours is developer. Yours is probably going to be us. If you've used Kintone before and you're using a subdomain, it might be different. If you've made some changes. That's right, Sean. Yeah, it could look like an email. So we've got our .env file, and from here, we want to, for those of you who wanted to learn authentication, here's a good one for you. Okay, so once Kintone, once a system knows who you are, and it's verified that, yes, in fact, you are who you say you are, your username and password matches up against how we've established your identity, then we move to the next phase called authorization, which means, are you allowed to do the things that you are trying to do? And so in my rush, I neglected to walk you through the steps to do the proper authorization, namely that we are targeting a specific app with a specific app ID, and that we have the actual permissions, the authorization to upload code into that, to upload code into that. And so let's try that again. So what I'm going to do inside of my app, here I am back in our MongoDB app, okay? And I'm going to go back into my app settings from my list view. Now you'll notice, if you're here, that in this URL, there's a segment that says -admin, -app, -flow, question mark, app equals, and then a number. This number is your app ID, and actually it crops up in various other places as well and other URLs that are related. But since we're here, what we're going to do is grab this app ID. What we'll need to do is go into this customize-manifest.json file and make a quick change to this number that is the number of the app. For me, that number is 35. If you're brand new to Kintone, that number will almost certainly be 1. And then if you've done this before, or if you've played around with Kintone, you may have another number somewhere, likely between 1 and 35, and probably not exceeding the number 35. This just increments by 1 depending on the number of apps. So we'll go ahead and we'll try this again. I've saved my my manifest.json file, my terminal. We're going to npm run start. And it looks like we're uploading, deployment completed, Webpack completed, great. It looks like we're in business now. Terrific. Okay. All right, so for those of you who are breathlessly engaged with us, what all you need to know is we added in, so we had our environmental variables file, and then we add a customized manifest file. You might be wondering, well, like, why don't we put the app ID inside of that environmental variable file? The file we are looking at right now is a JSON file, which doesn't accept variables. If you wanted to inject variables into a JSON file programmatically, you would likely need to programmatically create an entire JSON file, which is beyond the scope of our time today. We're going to want to run npm start. So npm run start to kick off our behavior over here in our folder. So what we're going to do is inside of your terminal. So inside of your terminal, in the folder where your Git repository is active, go ahead and type in the following command: npm run start. What that's going to do? So that's going to do a few things. We're setting up our environment to automatically push our compiled code into Kintone. And we do that using an npm package called Kintone-customize-uploader, Kintone customize uploader. And if you have not followed the instructions when we first did an npm install, maybe you missed this particular line, npm-g at Kintone customize uploader. So this is going to use these environmental variables that we had just set up behind the scenes, and it's going to run like a watch script waiting to like track and see if any saved changes have been made. And then once those changes have been made, to upload the script according. Our environment's set up, and now let's follow along with the existing behavior to understand what's happening on the React side, right? And so the first place we're going to look at is Index.js. This is what we call the entry point of the app. This is where a tool like Webpack is going to start sniffing around to take source code and compile it into something machine readable. And what you'll notice is that we've got a whole bunch of import statements over here. What happens is Webpack starts at this file and starts sniffing these different references to other files and pulling into here the functions that it needs for this file to work. We're importing a few things from React, the use state and use effect functions in particular, as well as React and React DOM libraries. We're importing some CSS that we won't touch, just that it's there. We're importing get records. This is our API call that we've made and you can check out later. And then here are our two React components of the evening, result list and search bar. Each one is getting pulled from a separate file in the components folder. And from here, we've got what's called an immediately instantiated function expression, IFI. That's what this parentheses function is. That's what's going on over here. And actually, what's happening is this is a setup that's going to enclose all of our variables into this function scope, so there's no variable leakage, and then immediately execute the function. This is not typically a way that we. It's not a typical React pattern, but it's a typical Kintone pattern when you're building Kintone customizations. Because you upload the customizations one file at a time into Kintone, then each file needs to be able to stand alone so its namespace doesn't leak and touch other files. And so we need some way of enclosing the namespace of a file, and Kintone will recognize immediately instantiated functions. So this pattern. We'll use strict, and then what we're doing is we're going to start pulling in the custom view ID. Now remember, we have these environmental variables, and we can we used a special package to inject those environmental variables into the command line, but actually they can be used directly in our source code. And Node sets us up to do that very well by basically attaching the environmental variables as keys, as properties onto this process.env object. So we have this view ID variable that came from right over here, view ID, and we're going to use it in our code to do some stuff with. What's that stuff? Well, here's some other Kintone specific behavior, which is this thing called an events on. All you want to know about events on at the moment is that we need some way of like triggering this behavior, right? Like some kind of an event hook. Well, typically we've got event hooks in the browser, like on page load, for example. But if we hook behavior onto on-page load, then maybe there are some, there might be some HTML elements that are not fully loaded by the time that we execute our code. And so Kintone hosts its own event hooks that you can use inside of the JavaScript customizations to guarantee that your code will fire off exactly when the timing is right. And so on an event called app.record.index.show, which all you need to know is basically when the list view page appears, then we're going to do some stuff. We're going to check to see, okay, do we have a custom ID over here? Is this, are we looking at our custom ID, sorry, our custom view? If not, then we return the event, which like ends the event. But if we are in our custom view, then now we start to play with it. We have this function called app. All React components are capitalized. That that tells us that like these components we're playing with are actually classes, and that they are templates for instantiation of a component. In this case, we've got this app component, and it's going to hold some behavior, which I'll get to shortly. What I want to focus on is what happens after that behavior, which is that some rendering happens. So what you're looking at over here, don't be fooled. This is not JavaScript. This is called JSX. And if we uploaded this file into any sensible JavaScript parsing engine, it wouldn't know what to do with it. It'll break. JavaScript certainly doesn't read HTML. And this certainly isn't HTML to begin with, although it looks an awful lot like it. What's happening behind the scenes, and this is where the magic, like the black magic of React happens. What's happening behind the scenes is that React lets us pretend that we are using components as though they are like HTML elements. So that way we can template our front end appearance more effectively and nest behavior into appropriate segments that we call components. And this is a component, and this is a component. So this app component is written like so, and the behavior for it is inside of this app function declaration. And so this render function is telling us, okay, we want you to display this template and then hook the rendering into a div with an ID of root. This should look familiar. This was the one and only thing that we put in our custom div. Some arbitrary div, except it wasn't arbitrary because then we added an ID of root, and I said we're gonna hang all of our behavior off of it later. That's where this line over here, 85, is where that connection, that magic happens. Now let's follow along with app. Okay, so what would we expect app to do? Well, we remember what our initial specifications were. We've got some kind of list of records, which Kintone provides for us, right? And then we want to be able to have a search bar that we can type stuff in, and then a place where the results are returned. Actually, more specifically for our purposes, all of the results are returned. And then as we type things into the search bar, we are filtering the existing list of results to find what matches. So we need some way of showing our search bar, and we need some way of showing or rendering our results list, as well as handling behavior that's exclusive to each one. And so that's what we see over here. Now there's some behavior up here that I'll get to that it has to do with the way data gets handled in React. But what you need to know as far as the rendering goes is inside of the app, we expect, in this case, two components, right? One, a search bar, and then another is a result list. Okay, so what's all this other stuff, right? It's a good question. All this other stuff begins to deal with the way React handles the flow of data. See, it's not enough that we're just rendering things. We have to be able to handle the way our list of things changes over time, right? Because it's not a static page. We're going to have an initial list that's going to get pulled from an API interaction with the Kintone database. And then we are going to have another interaction that happens based on the keystrokes that are pressed in that search input element. So how do we handle the data? How does that data get passed around to begin with? So on a casual thought, like on a casual initial thought, you would think, okay, well, first things first, we should get data. That makes sense. And let me ask you, what happens next and what happens before? Okay, well, what happens next is, depending on some values in the search bar, we will do some filtering. That's pretty straightforward. But Nim, what did you mean when you said what happens before? How does that make any sense? What is before calling an API call? There's nothing. Well, sort of. You see, React as a front-end rendering engine, essentially, it demands that you have something there to begin with, even before an API call is made. And so we need to seed some kind of an initial value inside of our components so that React knows what to show even before it completes the very first API call once it's loaded. And so what we should then expect to see is some place where the initial results get seeded, followed by some way of making an API call, ideally when that initial React component gets loaded, right? Like as soon as possible. And then some way of handling those changes once that results list is returned and then interacted with inside of the search bar. Let's go and find these things. So first things first, I'm going to point you to where the stage 0 is. Okay, and so that's over here. We have a little if clause in here, which is saying, okay, if I don't have any list items, right, then I want you to show this. I'm going to render this snippet, and so the snippet is a search bar and then something that says now loading. Okay, now it's a little bit, we're obfuscating, like, well, what happens if there are actually no results returned? Well, then it'll just keep saying now loading, and you won't be able to distinguish the two cases of the API call has left the building but not returned versus the API call has left the building and returned and come back with nothing. So it'll show you the same thing. Okay, so this is what the user will see first. And then, so then something needs to happen to like increase our list items array somehow. And so we've got some API call that happens, and then it's going to add to our list items array. And then we will be presented with a snippet that will have both our search bar and our results list. And then there's something that's going on over here that we'll come back to in a little bit. Well, we have, let me see what else I want to say. Okay. So ultimately, we need to start thinking about what happens when the data gets called, right? So the API call fetches my list of items. And then what? Well, that list of items might change over time, and the search results that are filtered from that initial list change over time as well. And then depending on those changes, React will render different things on the page. And so how do you handle that? How do you handle something like when my data changes and my arrays change, the page should be updated. Something should change, the change should be visible to the user in some noticeable way. Why do you do that? Well, React makes this very easy, largely by putting making a lot of magic happen in the background, but requiring you to use something that it calls state. And you can imagine a state as a bucket of your current snapshot of data. And every time things get added to that bucket or edited in that bucket or deleted from that bucket, the state changes. And then a whole bunch of automatic things happen that React handles behind the scenes so that you don't have to, which is part of what makes React so great. And so when these changes happen behind the scenes, React will automatically refresh the components that were somehow involved with that particular state. Okay, so that means we need a way of
setting a state. We need a way of accessing a state. We need a way to somehow involve components with a state. And we also not just need one state. We could have multiple different state buckets for different data. So in this particular case, we have two different state buckets. We've got a state bucket for the list of initial items that we've pulled, and we've got a state bucket for the filtered search results that we are displaying from that initial list of items. And so that's what you see over here on lines 33 and 34. We've got some Reactese for stuff that happens behind the scenes. So what this is some fancy ES6 notation that says, listen, there's this function called useState, which is a React function. Remember, we imported it at the top of our page. We need to give it an initial value. We need to seed our state initially. We got to give it something, anything, so that it knows what to display initially, no matter what, right? And so we've seeded useState with an empty array. Okay, now so that's what goes into this function. That's the parameter that's going into this function. This function will take a value and it will output an array, a tuple, so a 2-element array. The first element in that array will be the value of the state at the given moment in time, and we're accessing it. And the second item in the array will be the function that we will use to update that state. This is a React thing. So we've got two buckets of state, one for our original list of items that we did a fetch for, and we got what we got from that API call. And the second are the search results that we are filtering based on whatever we type into that search box. Right? So then what we see over here is this function called useEffect. And useEffect is another React function that triggers based on when particular conditions are met. In our case, it's going to trigger on component initialization. So when that app component is initialized, the useEffect hook triggers and the following activity happens. We get the records, we wait for them to be gotten, and then what we do with the result is we push the result into our two buckets of state, our list of items and our initial search results. Okay, that actually will then, now our state is updated, the component will refresh. And so as part of this component refreshing, we will return new snippets. Now, if the snippet hasn't changed, if the list item length is 0, we'll go to this snippet, but the list items will very likely be more than 0. And so we will be now seeing something else appear, namely search results appear in and around this, whatever this thing is. Well, I've been calling it a whatever this thing is, but it's appropriate at this time to go back to that question of how do you involve components with state? And you do that with this thing right over here, which are called props, P-R-O-P-S, props. Props look like HTML attributes, but they're not, because this snippet isn't HTML to begin with. It's pseudo HTML. It's syntactic sugar that we use to make it easier for us to code. And what this attribute does is it says, take this state search result. Remember, this is the variable that we use to access the state in that bucket. And when this variable changes values, pass into this result list component the updated values that it will do something with it on refresh. And by the way, refresh now. Okay, so that means if we're going to figure out how result list is actually chewing on these search results, we'll need to go into the component itself, which lives in another file and which we've imported. So we can take a quick look at our result list over here. And what we see is we are passing in the props as the parameters. So these are our search results. And what we're going to do is we're going to return a snippet. What happens is we take these props, these search, and the search results is a property on the props object. And remember, our search results, we're expecting an array of objects, right? When we return records from Kintone, y'all don't know what those records actually look like, but it's fair to say that it's an array of objects. There's a bunch of key value pairs and they're nested and blah, blah, blah. So there's something we're going to need to pick off and transform into some other array of objects, right? And there's a function we use that's perfect for a case like that called map. The map function takes a list of n items and it produces a new list of n items where each item has the same transformation applied one-to-one all the way down the list without skipping a thing. And so what we've done is we've taken the particular search result record object, which has a whole bunch of different stuff on it, and we've picked off a title and an author and a unique key. What else do I want to say about that? You can look in more detail at the get records API request file to see the nature of the this file. I'm sorry, the nature of the object that's coming back. And you'll see that actually we've seeded it to, there's some other mapping happening already, where we've taken this object and we've now mapped each record with its own complicated whatevers into a pretty flat object with 3 properties on it: a unique key, an author, and a title, which then in our result list, we pick off that key, author, and title, and we map each of those objects into a list of list items, literally the LI HTML tag. And so we're going to return a list of items, which is exactly what we would expect from a component called result list. So let's go back to our Index.js file, right? So we've got, now we want to think about how our results get filtered, okay? So we got to handle the search bar behavior somehow, right? And what the search bar behavior is that you type in something into the search bar, and the results should change. That list of result items should change based on whatever you typed in. So there's some change that's happening, and we need to handle it somehow. Okay, well, guess what? We've got something for that. There's a handleChange function. And this handleChange function is actually going to get passed down as props to SearchBar. And I'll explain why that happens in a moment, why we don't just have the handleChange function inside of SearchBar. What you need to know is that this handleChange function takes a browser event object. Typically, canonically, we use E to describe that. And what happens is there's a browser event that happens when you keystroke into an input element. And we're going to hook into that. What we're going to do is, so when you, every time that you type in a keystroke into that search bar, there's going to be a filter that runs checking to see if the following condition is met. For each list item, does the title match? Sorry, is there a substring in the title field that matches the string that's being inputted into the search bar? And if there is, keep that line item, keep that list item. Otherwise, get rid of it. And then update the state with the new results, which will change, which will trigger React's re-rendering of the list items component. Now, the reason why we have the handle change function inside of our app component and not inside of SearchBar is because in React, the data has to flow from parent components to child components. So we have an app component right now, and it has two children inside of it. One is SearchBar, and the other is ResultList. And SearchBar and ResultList are sibling components. They cannot modify each other's data. We need to go one level up at least to have the data waterfall down, have the parent component handle the data exchange between its children, among its children. So that's why SearchBar gets the function passed into it, but that function doesn't live there. Now in search results, sorry, in the SearchBar component, we should expect that we've got a search bar, right? And then some way of handling that change. So where do we go from here? Let's see, where do we go from here? So, let me open the floor to any questions while I open the rest of this. If you have any questions so far, please let me know. Okay, we've got 2 bits left. So right now, what we've done is I've walked through the code so that hopefully at this point you should understand it comfortably. And what we want to do at this point is code we want to complete the coding of the result list and the search bar as well. I've been showing you things that you're not seeing on your screen. You may have been coding along with me, which is terrific. That's just not the way that we anticipated to deliver this workshop, but you may have done it anyway, in which case, good for you. Yeah, Genji, I'm taking a look at my, yeah, go ahead. So the class name, I've added the search bar class name, and this is to hook into the CSS, so the CSS knows to turn just any old input element into a search bar. Then I've got an on change event. And so remember I was talking about this handle change function, right? The handling, the triggering of that handle change event happens at the search bar component level. But the moving around of the data, the handling of that data in the function itself happens at the app level. And so what I need to do over here is I need to trigger the function by passing it down through the props over here. And then if you notice, I've got, I have the rest of the information in Index.js. So this is where the event, that browser event object gets inputted. And then, and this is the important part, right? I've got to have, like part of the effects of the, okay, gotcha, John, thank you. Not a problem, so we'll walk through that pretty quickly. Part of the effect of this handle change function is to trigger the set search results app, which doesn't exist inside of the search bar component because it's a state that is attached to the app component. This state lives in the app component so that it can be hooked into the state changes at the app level. Okay, so let me catch y'all up on the search bar. So search bar, what you have done is change the class name and the on change event. And then again, is there anything else that folks are missing over here?
No, that file is those two are the only things.
Okay, great. Thanks, Genji. And folks, I apologize for the confusion. This is a teachable moment to talk about the difference between the master and workshop branches, as well as what happens when you're not on the right branch for some reason. And I guess that's what this workshop star is. I'm not quite, maybe something went on over here. I'm not quite sure. But in any event, folks, you actually have all of these merges available to you at any time. You can git check out the branch called master, and it'll immediately take you to the finished version of this project. And then you can go back to the version called workshop with your saved work on it, and work on it on your own. In any case, let's touch on the results list. And Genji, can you show me what it is that's missing for our colleagues joining us here today? So I make sure that we explain it to them transparently.
So sorry, I just typed it up, but essentially result list, the div with the class name result list. Yeah.
All the fun is gone. Okay, folks, let's take it from the top. I've got this list of results and I want to put a bunch of list items in it, correct? But I want to be able to somehow turn my list of results that currently lives as an array of objects into an array of list items. And with the magic of React, I can do that by mapping the array of objects into an array of pseudo HTML list items. And so I'm going to do that by first returning these list items. And they're not just list items, right? They live inside of an unordered list. And then there's an unordered, then I'm ending the unordered list on the other side. Okay. The way that I get my values from my results list is I use the props, because that information has been passed down as props. And so in my unordered list, I'm going to take these search results and I'm going to map them. And so I've got these result records, which look however they look. And actually, here's where I want to do the return. And this is where I'll return a bunch of stuff. And one of those stuff so I'll have I'll be picking off the title, the author, and the unique key. The unique key, I'll explain why we need that in just a minute. So it'll be unique key written by result record author. And then React demands that when you've got a list of items, that you have a way of, that you have a way of uniquely identifying them. And with Kintone, every record already has a unique ID. So all we're doing is we're grabbing that unique ID that was pulled among the information in the record, and we're reusing it.
And that's that. So we'll know we did this right when we go into our Kintone environment, which should have been automatically updating this entire time, because that's what we had set up in the beginning. And if we get no errors and we see the behavior respect the way that we were expecting, we're in luck. Okay, hey, Genji, this is great. This is exactly what we need. So who do we have to thank behind the scenes to have this ready? Was it you? Was it Sean? Was it Will? All of the above?
All Genji.
Oh, Genji. All right, man. Good work.
Genji's our man.
So folks, what you'll see over here is that 2 components. Actually, there's 3. There's the app component, which is hooked into this root div. And then there are 2 children that's a part of it. There's the search bar, and then there's the results list. So if I type in 1 piece, you'll see that every keystroke triggers the re-rendering of the result state. And you can see that because every time I put in a new keystroke, this console log with the filtered results changes. So my state's changing. The state changing updates the component rendering. And so it looks different on my screen. It looks different on the user screen. All right. So now what? Okay, folks. So let me present you with some opportunities to deepen the learning for today. Okay. What we did was we created a development version. And what you could do is you can think about how would you want to make this production ready. So one thing you might want to think about is how do we trigger a build file that is a production build file and not a development build file. Here are some other options. You can take this list of items and you can create them as each item as a hyperlink to a specific Kintone record or to a specific wiki page. You can add a button to clear the results. You could add, you can try searching for more than just the title field. And then you can also post your experiences on dev.to. If you get stuck and you need help, there are 2 places where we invite you to check out, 2 resources we invite you to check out. And one is the Kintone developer community forum on our website. And Stack Overflow is another place that we can go to ask questions about how to use Kintone.
Thank you, Nim. Just want to say thank you to the rest of you for your undivided attention, for sticking through. They work really hard to put this material together. And also thank you to our community partners, Hackbuddy by JavaScript LA. And so if you're enjoying this content, please be excited for our future workshops. There's new content coming all the time. And if you want to join the meetup to not miss any workshops, it's at bit.ly/KDP_events.
Well, then we want to thank you for being with us all this time. We hope you learned something. We hope that it was worthwhile for you. You could have spent your time doing a lot of other things. You spent it with us. We don't take that for granted. And we hope to see you soon.